On March 30th, 2007, in the state of Virginia, a woman named Lynn Balfour was getting ready to go home after a long day at work. As she prepared to leave, her phone rang. It was the babysitter who usually cared for her son.
Mrs. Lynn, why didn't you bring Bryce today?
The babysitter asked. Lynn said,
"What do you mean? I dropped him off with you this morning."
but the babysitter insisted.
No, you didn't.
Panic shot through Lynn. She rushed to her car, heart racing. When she opened the door, there he was, her 9-month-old son Bryce, still strapped in his car seat. She had forgotten to drop him off that morning. Instead, Bryce had been left in the car all day while she worked. Tragically, he had died from heat and suffocation. Let me tell you, my friend, that despite this story being so dark, it is no exception. This incident occurs in America on an average of 38 times per year. Let me tell you also that it's not just mothers who face this tragedy, fathers do too. You might be surprised to hear that these parents are often far from neglectful. In fact, many of them are deeply concerned about their children's safety. The issue here isn't about intentional negligence or lack of care. So you might ask, were all of them just absent-minded? The truth is, for a brief moment, part of their brain was absent. Even today, it remains a mystery that scientists are still trying to fully understand. Sure, we've learned a lot about how it works, but there's so much more we don't know. Take, for example, the different parts of the brain involved in how we perceive and interact with the world. There are 3 main parts, each playing its own unique role. Normally, they work together seamlessly, like a well-managed team in a multinational company. One of these parts is called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is like the junior employee with limited responsibilities. The brain says to it, "All right, you handle the simple tasks. Nothing that requires much thinking. Just stick to the routine, walking, eating, driving, going to the bathroom, basic stuff like that. Don't worry about anything complicated. That's not your job." Because those more complex tasks, well, that's where the next employee comes in, the hippocampus. The hippocampus is the head of the archives department. Its job is to store and retrieve the information we need throughout the day, keeping everything organized and accessible when we need it. And if you go higher up, you'll meet the chairman of the board, the CEO of this entire operation, the prefrontal cortex. This is the part that thinks, analyzes, draws conclusions, and uncovers the mysterious and the exciting. It's the decision maker, handling the most complex tasks our brain faces. All of these parts work together, creating a harmonious production system. So, where does forgetting come from? Forgetting is a glitch in this complex system. Now, let's revisit Lynn's day, the woman who tragically forgot her son in the car. Lynn had been up all night caring for her son, Bryce, who had a cold. On top of that, she was facing intense pressure at work. During her morning drive, she was on a call with a relative dealing with a problem, and then her manager called her about another issue at work. All this was happening while she was driving, feeling tired and exhausted, having hardly slept, and with her son sick in the back seat. Later, Lynn Balfour gave an interview where she spoke about the tragic accident.
It had been a very busy week. He had been sick with a cold. He didn't sleep hardly at all that night. My husband and I were exhausted. Normally, my husband dropped him off at daycare, but this particular week, my husband was riding with me. I was dropping him off first and then the baby. And I got a phone call on the way to work, and I instantly went into work mode. And I got to work, got out of the car, and went in, not realizing that I accidentally forgot to drop him off at daycare.
According to molecular physiologist David Diamond, when we are under pressure and stress, the most developed parts of our brain, the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus, tend to shut down. It's as if the director and the archive employee take a break, leaving a gap in the system. In this situation, who takes charge? The basal ganglia, the less sophisticated employee. While its role is important, it ends up acting outside its intended functions, relying solely on habits and routines. The problem is that the basal ganglia cannot think, remember, or analyze. It operates on autopilot, moving forward based solely on established routines. This is what happened with Lynn. The basal ganglia had her on autopilot. She arrived at work with her mind completely consumed by stress. Her brain was programmed to close the car and leave. As long as I get to work, I don't need to worry about picking anyone up. I just need to focus on my work and the issue with my manager. The key idea here, my friend, is that on that day, her routine changed. The baby chair which she used to sit her son in was being repaired. So Bryce, her son, was placed in a different seat behind the driver, not on the other side that she can see every day. With all due respect to the progressive ideas, leaving a child in the back seat is not the same as forgetting a sack of potato. I struggle to sympathize with this lady. However, rather than responding emotionally, I'll let David Diamond, a neuroscientist, explain.
Well, another one that's related to this, actually, and think about competing brain memory systems, is that as you're driving home, you intend to stop at the store. And then what happens? You drive right past the store and you end up going home and you don't have your groceries. Now, the important factor here is you actually have competing memory systems. You have one memory system that wants to remind you to interrupt your drive to go to the store. You have another brain memory system that takes you straight from work to get to home. And what you find consistently in these cases is the awareness of the child in the car seems to be suppressed. And yes, consistently, these parents spend an entire day at work. In fact, they talk about their children. They talk about how important it is for them to pick the child up at daycare. And they've completely lost awareness that the child is in the car.
For many years, neuroscience has viewed forgetfulness as an unfortunate glitch in our memory system. This glitch can be something simple, like forgetting the remote under the pillow, leaving the house without your car keys, or searching for your sunglasses while they're already on your head. Sometimes it's even ironic, like looking for your phone in the dark using its flashlight. But other times, this glitch can be far more serious and terrifying, as in the tragic case of Lynn and her son, Bryce. In the book Forgetting, Scott Small explains that forgetting is not merely a malfunction or an accidental symptom that leads to problems. In fact, forgetting is an intentional process in the brain running parallel to the act of remembering. It's a crucial system designed to help our minds function more efficiently, not just a flaw in our memory. This version emphasizes the idea that forgetting is a natural and necessary part of how the brain works, not just a defect. The idea that forgetting is an intentional system, as Scott Small suggests in Forgetting, highlights how forgetting plays a vital role in maintaining mental health and cognitive efficiency. Here are a few reasons why this perspective is important. Cognitive efficiency. If we remembered every detail of every experience, our brains would be overloaded with information. Forgetting allows us to clear out unimportant or outdated information so we can focus on what's relevant. Emotional balance. Forgetting helps us heal from negative experiences or trauma. By softening or erasing painful memories over time, our brains enable emotional recovery. Learning and adaptation. Forgetting makes space for new learning. It prevents us from being stuck in old habits or thoughts and allows us to adapt to new situations and challenges. The truth is that they are two systems opposite each other, but work for one goal. This goal is neither to remember nor to forget. According to Professor Blake Richards, the process of remembering and the process of forgetting are two memory activities. These activities serve one thing, which is your ability to make the right decisions. Without something as forgetting, essential and important information will be lost. Take, for example, the feeling of a sock on your foot, or the color of the t-shirt worn by the man in front of you at the supermarket. These are bits of sensory information we absorb constantly. The brain must make decisions saying, no, sorry, these things aren't important. I need to cancel them out. Most of this information ends up being forgotten. And perhaps the real glitch in cases like this is not when you forget, but when you remember everything in unnecessary detail, like recalling every face and every interaction. That's the glitch, the problem. In moments of crisis, if you're sifting through irrelevant details trying to filter out what matters, you're already too late. By the time you decide what's important, it could be fatal. This version emphasizes the brain's need to filter information for survival and efficiency, and how remembering too much can actually be detrimental. Let me introduce you to the case of Jill Price. She is the first person in the world to be scientifically documented with extraordinary autobiographical memory. Jill remembers everything that has happened in her life since she was 14 years old. If you ask her today, in her 50s, to recall any random date, say November 10th, 1999, or October 2nd, 2007, she can tell you what she ate for lunch and what she was wearing that day. Despite extensive research into her case, the results showed that this remarkable memory doesn't actually provide any significant advantage to her mental abilities. Surprising, right? You might think that someone with such a memory would ace every exam, become a physicist, or win a Nobel Prize. But no. In fact, having this kind of memory can have a negative impact. Consider those who have experienced trauma. They often struggle with painful memories they cannot forget. Jill herself wrote a book titled The Woman Who Can't Forget, where she talks about the overwhelming difficulty of living with her condition. For instance, she admits she was never particularly good at studying. What you might ask? Yes, her focus was constantly disrupted. Her ability to concentrate on the present or plan for the future was severely impaired, as though her brain was chained to the past. Every day the chain grows longer and heavier. But what if there were another system? A system that controls memory and forgetting, but not for your benefit. Imagine trying to recover important information, only for this system to deliberately make you forget it. This isn't your brain's natural process, but an external force imposed upon you. In the book Forgotten Remembrance, Irish researcher Guy Beiner explores this concept. He argues that regimes throughout history have understood the need for societies to filter events, to forget certain things while emphasizing others. This is more than just selective memory. It's about constructing a narrative, one that highlights their strengths while conveniently erasing their weaknesses. In essence, these regimes create and control collective memory, shaping how history is remembered or forgotten to serve their interests. This version clarifies the idea of external forces shaping memory, particularly in the context of historical narratives manipulated by regimes. This is why Guy Beiner documents what he calls forced forgetting, policies used by various regimes throughout modern history to erase uncomfortable parts of their past. A striking example of this is post-World War II Europe, where forgetfulness was actively employed. Let's look at the sequence of events. During World War II, Germany and Italy were at war with Britain and France. The death toll was staggering. Germany alone lost 8 million people, while France, Italy, and Britain each suffered around 500,000 casualties, including civilians and military personnel. Then, almost overnight, the war ended and these former enemies reconciled. Loans flowed, people traveled freely, and suddenly they were presenting themselves as the best of friends in stories and films. But how? These nations had killed each other, hundreds of thousands of lives were lost. But let me tell you, this isn't a trivial case of nations brushing aside their differences, nor is it an act of simply letting things slide. It's something more deliberate. After experiencing such devastating losses, these countries realized that the safest way forward was to release the grip on the past. Why waste the future in conflicts when they could instead forge a new identity based on shared interests? This allowed them to protect themselves from their dark histories and, together, build a powerful alliance for the future. Let me tell you, a country like France took the task of forgetting very seriously. France's legacy of war is particularly complex because, for 4 years, it was occupied by Germany during World War II. In that dark period, the French government made a fateful decision to protect itself from complete oppression by cooperating with the Nazis. This collaboration extended to horrific acts, including the persecution and deportation of Jews. In this situation, France found itself committing crimes under the humiliating pressure of German occupation. Fast forward to today, and France presents Germany as a virtuous sister, a close ally with whom they now cooperate. How can such a shift occur after so much pain? The answer, my friend, lies in forgetting. There's no other way to reconcile such a painful and shameful past without collective amnesia. This version underscores France's strategic use of forgetting to reconcile its complex wartime history with modern cooperation with Germany. After the war, there was an implicit agreement between the French government and society, an unspoken deal named after Vichy, the city that served as the base for the French government during the occupation. This Vichy syndrome, as described by historian Henry Rousseau, was a collective agreement to turn a blind eye to that painful period. It was as if the nation silently decided, we will pretend we did not see what happened. They would forget the trauma, the collaboration with the Nazis, and instead focus on the victories of the French army in resisting German occupation. But pay close attention, the narrative wasn't about defeating the Germans. After all, France wanted to work with them in the future. The Germans were now considered good. It was the Nazi regime that was framed as brutal. So the focus shifted to celebrating the French army's triumph over this oppressive regime. In this narrative, France emerges victorious, a hero in the fight against Nazism. However, remember what I said earlier: when your brain forgets information, it doesn't actually delete it. The memories remain, lurking beneath the surface, even if we choose to ignore them. Remember, my friend, just because we acknowledge the value of forgetting and appreciate its role in moving forward, it doesn't mean that forgetting is something to be imposed on us. No person or entity has the right to control our narrative, deciding what we should remember and what we should forget. We may convince ourselves that if we force ourselves to forget, we are solving the problem. But in reality, research shows that it's through speaking, discussing, confessing, and confronting the past that true freedom through forgetting can be achieved. Only by acknowledging and processing what happened can we finally let go and move forward.